Good day, everyone. This is Sir Erickson John Bailon, your teacher in English 10. Today, we're going to talk about the technical terms in research. The most essential learning competency for this lesson is distinguish technical terms used in research. Before we talk about those terminologies or words that are commonly used in research or in conducting a study, here are some of the definitions of research because you need to know first what research is, how it is being defined by some researchers and scholars. First, we have the definition from Clark and Clark. Research is a careful, systematic, and objective investigation. It is careful because you need to carefully plan about the things that you're going to do when you conduct your study. It is systematic because it involves a procedure, a process, and this process involves steps. Later, we're going to talk about those steps one by one. And it is objective because you need to deal with factual information, with data, and not just with your own opinions, with your perceptions of things, of some issues. It should be objective. And it is an investigation because you look for evidences that could support those relevant data that could support your research. It's conducted to obtain valid facts, draw conclusions, and establish principles regarding an identifiable problem in some field of knowledge. Take note that research is present in every field of knowledge. Fields like the field of medicine, the field of education, the field of engineering, and in all those other fields. Okay, in those fields, there are lots of existing problems. And what we do in research is that we identify a problem and then we try to look for a solution, a possible solution for that problem. That is one of the things that is being done in research. Here is another definition of research from Martinez. Research is a scientific process of critical selection of data, investigation and analysis of such to gain new knowledge or complement an existing one. Again, as I said earlier, it deals with factual information, with data, with gathering the data, with analyzing it, using your critical thinking when you analyze it, when you come up with your interpretations. So later we're gonna expound on that. This is a scientific process because it is very similar with the scientific method in solving a problem. Okay, when you do research, you can either gain new insights or new knowledge about a certain topic that you're working with, or you can complement knowledge or information to an already existing one because we already have a pool of knowledge. And when we do research, sometimes we discover new things. Sometimes we add information from what is already known. So those are the definitions of research. Now here are the steps in the research process. Earlier, it is said in the definition that research is systematic. It is systematic because it involves procedure or a process, and that process involves steps. Now we're going to talk about those steps right now. First, we have developing a research question. Research begins with a question. The researcher asks something about why is this happening, what factors make a certain phenomenon happen, what are the possible solutions to a problem. Those are the common questions that a researcher asks. And then from that is where a research starts. It's the starting point of research, a question. A researcher should possess the characteristic of being curious about things, having curiosity, being inquisitive, asking questions, because it's through that we can identify some researchable problems. Because not all problems that we can identify are researchable problems. In the next few videos, we're going to talk about that. And it's very important that a researcher is curious about this and asking a lot of questions, because that is where his or her research will start. Okay, next one, after you develop a research question, you gather data about the problem. This is now the time that you read about your topic, the research problem that you have come up with. You will do this because you need to gain an in-depth understanding of the research problem or research topic or the research question you're dealing with. Because it's important that the researcher knows a lot about the topic he's working with. And then after that, you construct or formulate a research hypothesis. Later, since hypothesis is one of the common terms in research, we're going to talk about that and those two forms or two types of hypothesis in research. And then after you formulate or construct a research hypothesis, you test the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is one of the types of hypothesis. Later we're going to talk about that. And then you present, analyze, and interpret data. You present data through the use of nonlinear texts just like graphs, pie graph, bar graph, line graph, pictograph, diagrams just like Venn diagram, illustrations, and tables. Those are just some of the ways in which we can present data. Then you analyze it, make use of sometimes you make use of measures of central tendency just like mean, median, and mode to analyze it. And then those are just some of the ways in which we can analyze the data through those statistical tools. And then you interpret the data from those data that you've gathered after analyzing it. What are your interpretations? How do you interpret the data? What is common about those data, about those information that you have gathered? What's the common pattern? What are the conclusions that you can have? That's the next step. It is drawing a conclusion. It's the time that come up with a conclusion based on the data, how you have analyzed, how you have interpreted the data, and then you communicate the results. How do you communicate the results and findings of your research? Sometimes you can, especially students, they join defense, in which they present their research in front of a panel. Then you can also publish your research. Why is there a need for us to communicate the results of our research? It is because we need to share the knowledge, the new insights that we have gained from our research. Because it's important that other people also know about what you have found out, right? And also, it is because why should we think about how we will relay the information to other people? It is because in research we have the significance of the study. In the significance of the study part of the research, that is where you tell the reader of your research who are the groups of people who will be benefiting from your research, from the findings of your research. That's why it's important to communicate the results and findings of your research. Now we move on with the different terminologies. Here is the first terminology in research that we're going to talk about. We have hypothesis. A hypothesis is a tentative conclusion or answer to a specific question raised at the beginning of the investigation. Earlier, when we talked about the research process, the first step is developing a research question. For that research question, you gather data about the problem and then you construct or formulate a research hypothesis. As what is said here, the research hypothesis is a tentative conclusion or solution or answer to the research question that you have at the beginning of your research. All throughout your research, when you conduct your study, you're going to prove whether your hypothesis is correct or not. It is an educated guess because it's not just a simple guess. You need to really think about it before you come up with your hypothesis. And to come up with a good hypothesis, you need to know more about the topic, the research problem you are working with. It's an educated guess about the answer to a specific question. Now here are the two forms of hypothesis. First one is the operational form, which is stated in the affirmative or positive form, while the null form is stated in the negative. The operational form states that there is a difference between the two phenomena. It is also called the alternative hypothesis, and we have this symbol for the alternative hypothesis, which is HA. For the null form, or the null hypothesis, we have the symbol HO. It states that there is no difference between the two phenomena. The common difference with this is that the first one, which is the operational form or alternative hypothesis, is positive. The other one is stated in the negative form. There is the word no in the null hypothesis. It's easy to identify if it's in null form because most of the time we see the word no or not. Now here's an example of a research question. Is there a significant relationship between reading comprehension and academic performance of grade 10 students in Pablo Roman National High School? Here in this research question, the problem is we want to know whether there is a correlation or a relationship between the two variables, which are reading comprehension and academic performance of grade 10 students in Pablo Roman National High School. We want to know if their scores in examinations, in tests, and even their grades. We want to know whether those factors that define their academic performance are being affected by their skills in reading comprehension. Like when they understand things that they read, does it affect the reading texts that they read? Does it affect their overall academic performance? That's the problem here. That's the question. You want to know, you want to figure it out. That's what you want to answer. Now from that research question, let's have examples of hypothesis. Okay, take note, if it's singular, it's hypothesis. Hypothesis. If we have two or more hypotheses, the spelling becomes hypotheses, hypothesis. Okay, let's have this first example of hypothesis. There is a significant relationship between reading comprehension and academic performance of grade 10 students in Pablo Roman National High School. So you can see this statement is the answer. It answers the question earlier, the research question. It affirms that there is really a significant relationship between those two variables. So this is an example of a hypothesis in the operational form or an alternative hypothesis. Next one we have, there is no significant relationship between reading comprehension and academic performance of grade 10 students in Pablo Roman National High School. So you can see in the beginning of this statement, it says there is no. So one of our clues there to find out what kind of hypothesis this is that word, which is the word no. So that means this is an example of hypothesis in the null form or the null hypothesis. In research, most commonly we make use of the null hypothesis because we don't want to jump into the conclusion that there is a correlation between those two variables. We want to use this negative form or null form, the null hypothesis. That's why in our research process, it says there that we need to test the null hypothesis because it is what is being used, the hypothesis in null form. Now let's talk about two types of research, which are qualitative research and quantitative research. Actually, we have other types and classifications of research, but for now we're going to talk about these two types of research, which are the most common ones. First is the qualitative research. Qualitative research is used to form an understanding of underlying concepts or principles in society, in the educative process, and in our community. It is also often referred to as exploratory research. In doing a qualitative research, we are trying to describe a certain phenomenon. We are looking into its qualities, characteristics, and attributes in order for us to come up with interpretations. And it also involves analysis of data such as words from interviews, pictures from a video, and objects just like an artifact. So these are the common sources of data in a qualitative research. These are just examples of things from which data is being collected or gathered. Another kind of research is the quantitative research. It is used to translate numerical data to findings. From the word itself, quantitative. So it gives us an idea that we're gonna deal more with numbers in coming up with the results and findings of our research. Consequently, this type of research is not only limited to translating numerical data to findings. It can also be used to compare attitudes, learning preferences, and behaviors in a quantitative manner. So those are the two common kinds or types of research, quantitative and qualitative research. Now let's have literature review. Literature review is the part of research that discusses published information in a given subject area. In the chapter 2 of research, we have what we call the review of related literature. It is the part wherein we include relevant articles in our research. Some people refer to it as a simple organization of sources or a summary of sources, but it is actually more than that. It provides the recap and reorganization of information. It might also trace the intellectual progress on the subject at hand. This is where you include relevant articles, just like what I said, to the research topic or research problem that you are working with. Next is the content analysis. Content analysis is a research technique that entails objective and systematic analysis of existing and available documentary materials. So in using this research technique, we deal with documents. We analyze those documents objectively and systematically. Next is the research methodology. It is the method of research design, the paradigm, statistics, and analysis, and the approximate timeline for the completion of the study. It is where you explain how you will be choosing your respondents, who they will be, what are the statistical tools that you're going to use to analyze the data, and how are you going to interpret it in the timeline of your study, because research is time-bound. That's why we need to be certain of the time period that we're going to conduct it. Now let's have the element. Element is the unit about which information is collected and which provides the basis of analysis. They are the members of the population. These are certain types of people, families, social clubs, and the like. Elements and units of analysis are often the same. Still, the former refers to sample selection, while the latter relates to data analysis. Going back to our example earlier, with regards to whether there is a correlation or a relationship between the variables reading comprehension and academic performance of grade 10 students, the elements in that research are the grade 10 students. Here is another example. For instance, the families in a slum area are the subject of an investigation. They are what we call the respondents in the investigation or research or study. So they are the elements of the study. While selecting the families to be included in the sample, because you can't have all of the families in that slum area, you just choose some of them, which will be the sample of your research. Those families in the slum area are called the elements. Still, when data have already been gathered and being analyzed, the families are called units of data analysis. Now let's have the population. Population is the theoretically specific aggregation or combination or collection of the elements. This is also called the universe. Suppose a study is to be conducted to determine the profile of the college students at a university. The term population includes all the college students, whether full-time, part-time, professional, working, male or female. Regardless of those factors, if a certain research or study involves college students, the population will be all the college students at a university. So that's the population. Example now is a group of people who are actually selected to participate or to be the subject of the study. So from the population, you just select or choose people who will be part of the study, and that's what we call the sample. Sampling unit is that element or set of elements considered for selection in some stage of sampling. In a simple single-stage sampling, the sampling units are the same as the elements. However, in a more complex sampling, different levels of sampling units may be employed. For example, you may select a sample of adults, of which only the last of these are the elements. The first sampling unit is called the primary sampling unit, the census box. Let's just say, for example, a certain barangay. The second unit is called the secondary sampling unit, the households, the houses in which different families are residing. And the third unit is called the final sampling unit, which are now the adults. They are the ones to be interviewed for the census or the survey. Let's have this illustration of population example. Suppose we have a pizza. The whole pizza is the population, while a piece of pizza, a slice of pizza, is what we call the sample. In research, yes, we have the population, but we just select a portion of the population that will be the sample of our study. They are the ones to be the respondents, they are the ones to be the subject of our study, the sample. Now let's have the sampling frame. This is the actual list of sampling units from which the sample or some stage of sample is selected. If a sample of students is selected from a student roster or a list of students, that is what is being referred to as a student roster, a list of names of the students. The roster is the sampling frame. In a single-stage sampling design, the sampling frame is the list of elements composing the study population. So this is a list of the elements who will be involved in the study. Next is the observation unit. It is an element or aggregation or combination of elements from which information is collected. The unit of analysis in the observation unit is often the same, the individual person, but not always the same. These are the elements in the study, and they are the subjects of the study, and most of the time they are the respondents of the study. They are what we call observation unit. Thus, the researcher may interview the heads of household, which are considered the observation units, to collect information about all household members, which are the units of analysis. In other words, the observation units or respondents are the people who are interviewed or who are requested to accomplish questionnaires for data collection. In doing a census, those people who conduct it are interviewing the heads of the households, most of the time the parents, either the mother or the father. They are being interviewed about information about their family, about the family members. And they are the ones who are called the respondents because they are the ones who answer during the interview or answer some questionnaires for information gathering or data gathering. Now let's have variable. Variable is a set of exclusive attributes, qualities or characteristics like sex, age, and employment status. The elements of a given population may be described in terms of their individual attributes in a given variable. Going back to our example earlier about the relationship between reading comprehension and academic performance of grade 10 students in Pablo Roman National High School, the variables that are present in that research topic are reading comprehension and academic performance. Variables can be dependent or independent variables. We're going to talk about that in the next few lessons. Thus, a researcher may describe the age distribution of a population by examining the relative frequency of their ages. A researcher can also assign age range. For example, how many respondents are from 11 to 20 years old, from 21 to 30 years old, from 31 to 40 years old, 41 to 50 years old, 51 to 60 years old, 61 and above. We can make use of that age range. A variable must possess variation. It should vary, should have differences. Suppose all elements in the population possess the same attribute. In that case, that attribute is constant in the population rather than a part of the variable. constant, it is not changing, so it's not a variable anymore. Parameter. Parameter is the summary description of a given variable in a population. Examples of parameters are the mean income of all the families of a city, the mean age of all the people in a city, the age distribution of all the people. So here we make use of statistical tools, like the mean, the median, and the mode. Statistics. Statistics is the summary description of a given variable in a sample. The mean income computed from a sample and the age distribution of that sample is statistics. Sample statistics are used to make estimates of population parameters. So after applying the statistical tools, just like the mean, median, and mode, the figures or the numbers, which can also be expressed in percentage, are the ones that we call the statistics. And we use those statistics in our research. Plagiarism. Plagiarism is the representation of another author's thoughts, ideas, concepts, and principles. In various educational institutions and contexts, various definitions and guidelines shall be encountered. In doing a research or in conducting a study, plagiarism is a very serious issue. We should avoid plagiarizing other authors' works. We can do this by always citing or acknowledging the sources of information that we are including in our research. Lastly, we have APA, or the American Psychological Association. APA is the documentation style used by American Psychological Association. This style followed in writing research studies is mainly used in the field of education. We use this style, this is the one which is commonly used, to cite the sources of information that we have used in our research. This is also one way for us to avoid plagiarizing the works of others. Here is an example of a list of references which are actually used in the module of the 4th quarter for English 10. So in this list of references or sources of information, the style used is the APA, or the American Psychological Association style or format. Okay, so now that's all. Thank you for listening, and see you again next time for another informative lesson in English 10. Bye everyone!